Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got some wild stories from around the globe. Presidential meetings, surprise handshakes, wars, rumors about leaders fleeing. Even Elon Musk and Prince William popped up.
It's been a busy week on the international stage, that's for sure.
It has been. We'll break down these events, keeping it, critical and neutral, but definitely with some humor sprinkled in. Remember, we do the reading and investigation for you. Just sit, listen, and relax.
Sounds like a plan.
So first up, Trump's back in the White House, and he's already making waves. He kicked things off with a trip to Paris for the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral. It was a pretty symbolic move, don't you think?
Absolutely. A rebuilt cathedral, a re-elected president, it definitely sends a message of resilience and a return to power.
A return to power, yeah. But it wasn't all smiles and photo ops. Trump also had a pretty tense meeting with French President Macron.
Yes, the body language was definitely frosty.
Right.
And this meeting highlighted some of the underlying tensions regarding U.S. support for Ukraine.
Right. Trump's stance on Ukraine has been, well, a bit of a question mark, and it's making a lot of people nervous, especially with some of his more controversial cabinet picks.
Like Pete Hegseth for defense secretary. Hegseth has been pretty vocal about scaling back U.S. involvement in the conflict, and some experts are worried that this could embolden Russia.
So what does that mean for the average Ukrainian teenager? I mean, could this actually lead to more fighting?
That's a real concern. The U.S. has been a major supporter of Ukraine in its conflict with Russia, and a reduction in aid or military support, well, it could shift the balance of power. It's a complex situation with potentially serious consequences.
Yeah, it's kind of scary to think about. And what about the impact on NATO?
NATO is it's a military alliance between the U.S., Canada, and most of Europe. It was formed after World War II to deter Soviet aggression.
So the U.S. steps back from its commitments to NATO. Could that weaken the alliance and make Europe more vulnerable?
It's a possibility that many analysts are discussing. A strong U.S. presence in NATO has traditionally been seen as a deterrent to Russian expansionism. If the U.S. reduces its role, it could raise concerns among European allies and potentially embolden Russia.
Okay, so we've got Trump back in the White House, and his foreign policy decisions, well, they could have a ripple effect across the globe. But what about here at home? How will his policies affect us?
Well, one area where Trump has promised big changes is education.
Yeah, he's talked about shaking things up, but he hasn't really given specifics.
That's true. He's been critical of the current education system, but hasn't outlined a clear plan for reform. So it's still unclear how his policies will actually play out.
But it's something we should definitely keep an eye on because education affects all of us, right?
Absolutely. It's the foundation for our future, and it's important to be informed and engaged in the debate about how to improve it.
Speaking of things that are important to be informed about, let's talk about Syria. Remember Syria? Well, it's back in the headlines because things are getting really intense over there.
Yes, there have been reports of rebels taking control of Damascus and rumors that President Assad has fled.
Wait, Assad is gone. That's huge.
Well, the situation is still developing, and the information is a bit murky. Russian officials are denying the reports, and Trump has taken a cautious approach, saying the U.S. should let it play out.
So basically, we have no idea what's going on.
Not exactly. It's a fluid situation with conflicting reports coming in. We need to be careful about jumping to conclusions.
That's fair. But if the rebels have actually taken over Damascus, wouldn't that be a major turning point in the Syrian civil war?
It would be a significant development for sure. The Syrian civil war has been raging for over a decade and has resulted in a devastating humanitarian crisis. If the Assad regime were to fall, it would create a major power vacuum with the potential for further instability and violence.
So what happens next?
That's the million-dollar question. The outcome of the Syrian conflict will have ripple effects throughout the Middle East and beyond. The U.S. has a vested interest in the region, and Trump's response to this crisis will be closely watched.
And what about the impact on global terrorism?
That's another crucial factor. The instability in Syria has already allowed groups like ISIS to gain a foothold. A prolonged conflict or a chaotic transition could create opportunities for extremist groups to regroup and expand their influence.
Wow, this is all pretty intense.
It is. But that's the reality of global politics. It's complex, unpredictable, and often messy. But it's also important to remember that we're not just passive observers. We can make a difference by staying informed, engaging in dialogue, and advocating for policies that promote peace and stability.
Okay, I'm all for promoting peace and stability, but first, can we take a quick mental break with a dad joke?
Sure, why not?
Okay, here goes. What did the ocean say to the beach?
I don't know. What?
Nothing, it just waved.
Oh, boy. You really are full of them, aren't you?
Right. All right, back to the serious stuff. This is a lot to take in. We've got a reelected Trump making waves on the world stage, a potential power vacuum in Syria, and a whole lot of uncertainty about what the future holds.
You've summed it up perfectly.
Right.
But don't worry, we'll break it all down for you in the next segment. We'll delve deeper into the Middle East, explore the potential for a U.S.-Saudi-Israel deal, and discuss what all of this means for America and for you.
Stay tuned, folks. Yeah, because it's about to get really interesting.
Welcome back. Now let's shift gears and head over to the Middle East, another region where Trump's return is sending shockwaves.
Yeah, it's like everyone's holding their breath to see what he'll do next. The Middle East was already a tense place, and now with Trump back in the mix, it feels like anything could happen.
That's a great point. There's a sense of anticipation, but also a lot of anxiety. Some leaders are hoping Trump will revive old alliances, while others are worried about potential disruptions.
And let's not forget about the potential U.S.-Saudi-Israel deal that's been making headlines. What's the latest on that?
Well, there have been rumors of a deal in the works for months, but it's still unclear what exactly it would entail. Some speculate it could involve security guarantees for Israel in exchange for Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with them.
That sounds like a big deal. But why is Saudi Prince Turki Al Faisal criticizing Israel then? I thought they were supposed to be getting closer.
His comments at the Manama Dialogue were definitely a curveball. He condemned Israel's actions in Gaza and even used the term genocide, which is a very serious accusation.
Wow. That doesn't sound like someone who's ready to make a deal.
It's possible that the Saudis are playing hardball, waiting to see what concessions Trump is willing to offer.
Your take.
They might be calculating that they have more leverage with Trump than with previous administrations.
So could this deal actually fall apart before it even gets started?
It's definitely a possibility. The situation is very fluid, and there are a lot of moving parts. We'll have to wait and see how things play out.
Okay. So we've got a potential deal in the works, but also a lot of tension between the parties involved. It's complicated, to say the least.
It is, and that complexity is what makes the Middle East such a challenging region to understand. There are deep-seated historical grievances, religious differences, and geopolitical rivalries at play.
And now we've got Trump adding his own brand of unpredictability to the mix.
That's right. Trump's foreign policy has been characterized by its impulsiveness and its willingness to break with traditional norms. It's difficult to predict what he'll do next, which makes it all the more important to stay informed and engage in critical thinking.
Speaking of unpredictable, did you see that meme Trump posted about the Middle East peace process? It involved a camel, a falcon, and a plate of hummus. I'm not even going to try to explain it.
Yeah, I saw that. It's best we move on.
Agreed. But on a more serious note, what does all this mean for the average American?
Well, on a global level, it means the U.S. is likely to become even more unpredictable on the world stage. With Trump at the helm, we can expect bold moves, sudden shifts in policy, and a whole lot of Twitter diplomacy.
And what about the potential impact on things like the economy, national security, and even things like travel and study abroad programs?
Those are all valid concerns. The Middle East is a major source of oil, and instability in the region could lead to higher gas prices. Terrorism is also a concern, and increased tensions could lead to a heightened risk of attacks. And of course, any conflict in the region could have implications for travel and study abroad programs.
So basically what happens in the Middle East doesn't stay in the Middle East.
Exactly. It's a globalized world, and events in one part of the world can have ripple effects across the globe. But remember, knowledge is power. By staying informed, you can better understand the complexities of the world and make more informed decisions about your own future.
So what are some concrete steps our listener can take to stay informed about what's happening in the Middle East and how it might affect them?
Well, first of all, I'd recommend following reputable news sources. There's a lot of information out there, so it's important to be discerning. Read articles from different perspectives, fact check information, and be wary of sensationalized headlines.
And don't just rely on social media for your news.
Exactly. Social media can be a great way to connect with others and share information, but it's also important to be aware of the potential for misinformation and bias.
So read critically, think critically, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this segment. We've talked about the potential U.S.-Saudi-Israel deal, the tensions between those countries, and the wider implications of Trump's return to the White House for the Middle East and the world.
And we've emphasized the importance of staying informed, engaging in critical thinking, and making your voice heard.
Up next, we'll zoom back in on the U.S. and explore some of the key policy areas where Trump has promised big changes.
We'll be talking about everything from immigration and trade to climate change and education, and we'll discuss how these policy areas might affect the lives of our listeners.
Stay with us. All right, we're back for the final leg of our deep dive. And trust me, we've saved some of the juiciest bits for last.
We've talked about Trump's return to the global stage and the potential shakeups in the Middle East, but now let's bring it back home to the U.S. What's on the agenda for Trump 2.0?
Well, he's promised a whole lot of changes.
Yeah.
Everything from immigration and trade to climate change and education. It's like he's trying to hit the reset button on everything.
He's certainly not shying away from bold moves. That's for sure. And he's already signed a flurry of executive orders on his first day back in office.
Executive orders? What are those again?
They're basically presidential directives that have the force of law without needing to go through Congress.
So he can just make stuff happen without anyone else's approval. That seems kind of powerful.
It is powerful, and it's often used by presidents to bypass congressional gridlock or to push through controversial policies.
Okay, so back to these big changes Trump's promising. What's the deal with immigration?
Well, he's pledged to further tighten border security and to crack down on illegal immigration. He's also talking about making changes to legal immigration, potentially limiting the number of people allowed into the country.
That sounds like it could be pretty controversial,
Yeah.
especially for families who are hoping to immigrate to the U.S. or for people who are already here undocumented.
It definitely has the potential to spark debate and legal challenges. Immigration is a complex issue with both economic and humanitarian dimensions, and Trump's approach is likely to be polarizing.
And what about trade? I remember hearing a lot about tariffs during his first term.
Yes, tariffs were a major part of Trump's trade policy during his first presidency.
Yeah.
He imposed tariffs on goods from China and other countries in an effort to protect American jobs and businesses.
But didn't that also lead to higher prices for consumers?
It did. Tariffs essentially act as a tax on imported goods, which can drive up prices for consumers. It's a delicate balancing act trying to protect domestic industries without hurting consumers.
So is Trump planning to bring back the tariffs?
It's unclear at this point. He's said he's willing to use tariffs as a negotiating tool, but he hasn't announced any specific plans yet.
Okay, moving on to climate change. This is a big one, right?
It is. Climate change is one of the most pressing challenges facing the world today, and Trump's stance on it has been, well, shall we say, unconventional.
He's pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement before, hasn't he?
He did. The Paris Agreement is an international agreement aimed at reducing global greenhouse gas emissions. Trump argued that it was unfair to the U.S. and withdrew the country from the accord.
So is he planning to rejoin it now that he's back in office?
It doesn't seem likely. He's consistently expressed skepticism about climate change science and has promoted policies that favor fossil fuels over renewable energy.
Wow, that's concerning. I mean, climate change is already having a real impact on the planet. We're seeing more extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and disruptions to ecosystems.
You're absolutely right. The scientific consensus on climate change is overwhelming, and the need for action is urgent. But Trump remains a climate change skeptic, and it's unclear how his policies will address this critical issue.
It's definitely something we need to keep a close eye on.
Agreed. Now let's talk about education, another area where Trump has promised big changes.
Yeah, he's been pretty critical of the current education system.
Yeah.
But what exactly does he want to do?
Well, he's talked about increasing school choice, giving parents more options for where to send their children to school. He's also a proponent of vocational training, arguing that it's a more practical path for many students than a traditional four-year college degree.
Those ideas sound interesting,
Yeah.
but how would they actually work in practice?
That's where the details get tricky. School choice is a complex issue with passionate advocates on both sides. Some argue that it gives parents more control over their children's education, while others worry that it could exacerbate inequalities between schools.
And what about vocational training? Is that really the best option for everyone?
Vocational training can be a valuable pathway to a good paying job, especially in fields like healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. But it's not necessarily the right fit for every student, and it's important to ensure that vocational programs are high quality and provide students with the skills they need to succeed in the 21st century workforce.
It seems like all of these policy areas are pretty complicated. There are a lot of different perspectives, and it's hard to know what the right answers are.
That's the thing about politics. It's rarely black and white. There are always trade-offs to consider and different values at play. And the more informed and engaged you are, the better equipped you'll be to shape the world around you.
Speaking of shaping the world, did you hear about Elon Musk's latest venture? Apparently, he's building a giant space laser that can write messages on the moon.
Wait, what is that for real?
I'm just messing with you. But
Yeah.
wouldn't that be cool? Imagine seeing "Hello World" written across the moon in giant glowing letters. Okay, back to reality. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We talked about Trump's return to the White House, his foreign policy agenda, his domestic policy priorities, and even a few out of this world ideas.
It's been a wild ride, but hopefully you've gained some valuable insights along the way.
Remember, we do the reading and investigation for you. Just sit, listen, and relax.
And don't forget to think critically, question everything, and stay engaged.
So, what stands out to you in all of this? What questions do you have? What are you gonna do to make a difference?
We'll keep digging into these stories and more in future episodes. Subscribe if you found this useful and want the latest news.
And remember, even when the world feels like it's going a little crazy, there's always hope, and there's always something you can do to make it a better place. Thanks for tuning in.